Hello everyone, this is Kat. Welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. Today will be the continuation of Paper Agency. This will be part 2, and just for context, this one does start out with a texting conversation between Watchman and Red Tower. Watchman: I'm mad at you. Red Tower: the fuck did I do? BF saw your stupid footprint on me, and now he's determined to fight someone. If you use me as a springboard again, I'll let him have you. Well, that's all right. Throw Fukushima under the bus. Asshole deserves it. Why does everyone hate that guy so much? He's not even interesting. Hint: it's because he's a dick. No argument. He's just a boring dick, middle-aged underachiever that takes out his frustrations on his work crew. It's not especially interesting psychology. Nothing for people to get so worked up over. Not every antagonist in your life is going to be excitingly complex of a supervillain. Sometimes you just get a garden-variety asshole who uses the job that Daddy got him to trip teenagers into cement mixers. Are you still mad about that? Yes. Speaking of work sites, are you going to be on location tomorrow? The asbestos remediation team got done ahead of schedule. I'm going to ask that potential recruits come in early. Once we get your field partner secured, I can start looking for patrollers. No, I promised BF we'd have the day. Plus, we don't know if I passed. Bullshit, we don't know. Orca gave me the wink. He can wink? Whales don't close their eyes unless they're sleeping. It was a metaphorical wink, like a meaningful expression. Are you sure you're not just projecting, because Kugo-san doesn't really have different expressions? Punk, I will come over there to beat your ass. Don't think I won't. Anyway, I can do the interview myself. Sorry. Nah, have fun with your boy. Then you can spend the day after that quitting all your crap part-times. We still don't know that I passed. Don't you fucking start with me. I'm not dealing with sidekicks by myself. If I have to go have a patrolling force, then I will not be babysitting them by myself while you go pretend to be a waiter. One way or another, you're going to commit to having one goddamn career. I'll hire you as a civilian contractor if I fucking gotta. Pain in my ass. Barista. What? I got fired from the cafe a while ago. The fuck did you do? Not really sure. The manager started yelling, and I was asleep on my feet, so I zoned out after a while, and he made me take off my apron and leave. I got another job at a coffee shop. Cool. You're going to be quitting that one, too. Also, I'm getting an espresso machine for the agency, since apparently you know how to do that now. Fuck knows we're going to need it, surrounded by high school-aged fetuses. I'm a high school-aged fetus. You don't count. Gotta go. BF is out of the shower. My turn. Ew, I don't need to know you're getting laid. Not like that. I'm at his parents' place tonight. We stayed up watching cat videos until the train stopped running, so they told me to stay over. That's so boring. Where did I go wrong with you? Also, his parents. The Stepford assholes? I thought we hated them. No, the teachers he lives with. I never saw them together before, but they imprinted on him hard. It's like that meme of the police lady with the dog. Nice to know it was mutual. I'll give you the report on the new guy tomorrow. Get some sleep for once. Night. For once, Hitoshi woke up without needing his alarm, or the one after that, or the emergency backup one after that, or Mike sticking his head in the door to tell him it was time for breakfast. He even felt like he'd slept for more than 5 minutes. Izuku was up already because he was an alien, but he was also a very muscular alien doing complicated yoga right next to the bed where Hitoshi could enjoy the show without having to move his head or leave his warm cocoon of blankets. Morning. His greeting broke on a yawn, and Izuku smiled without looking in his direction. He was balanced on his palms, with his elbows bent as he folded his legs over his head to rest his knees on the floor. It hurt just to look at, but didn't seem to be bothering Izuku. Good morning. I'll be done here in a minute. Don't rush on my account, Hitoshi murmured, but also reached for his phone. The notification light was blinking, which meant that he had a new message. Unemployed people didn't get to ignore their inbox in favor of watching their significant other work out. It turned out to be an email, and he grumbled under his breath when he realized it was from Red Tower. The timestamp was from 1 a.m. He knew pro heroes kept bizarre hours, but that was ridiculous. Fuck. He retreated back under his blanket after reading it. What? Toshi? There was a thump as Izuku dropped out of his pose, and then light when he lifted the blanket to peer under the edge. Are you okay? No, I gotta meet somebody in an hour for a job interview. He groaned and sat up. He'd have just enough time to shower, dress, and steal one of Aizawa's pouches. I didn't think I was going to be the one to fuck up when I made you promise about our day. You didn't. It's still early. Izuku leaned over to kiss his forehead, which did a lot to sweeten Hitoshi's mood. I need to go home and change anyway. If you go to your meeting, we can meet up after to get a late breakfast afterwards." "You're not mad?" "Why would I be mad about being right?" Izuku laughed as he dodged Hitoshi's playful swat. "I told you that you'd be popular. Anyway, if you're occupied, then I can get my run in." "You're a masochist." Hitoshi had tried to run with him, but always ended up getting lapped. He was a graduate of a top hero program in the world, and his civilian boyfriend could outrun him without breaking a sweat. He'd be annoyed if it wasn't also deeply attractive. "Oh, I don't think so." Izuku yanked the blanket off him and tossed it across the room. "I'm more of the other thing. Come on, Sleeping Beauty, get up." Ugh. Despite the fact that he would rather do almost anything than leave his bed, Hitoshi hauled his carcass into the bathroom for the world's fastest shower. Izuku was gone by the time he got out, his hair dried, and the foundation layer of his costume on, but his boyfriend's presence could be felt in the form of a protein shake and a gel pouch waiting on the kitchen counter. Mike was at the stove making real food. "Midori told us about your meeting today, and he left you something to take on the train." He smiled fondly. "He's a nice boy. I'm glad you brought him over. You think we'll be seeing more of him?" "I hope so." Hitoshi shotgunned the gel pouch with an ease that came from way too much practice, and then sat down at the table so he could talk while strapping on his armor sections. "He has to work a lot." "You mentioned. What does he do?" Mike flipped a perfectly golden pancake, and Hitoshi watched and hated life a little. Later, he'd have some real food later. "Stuff." Hitoshi realized that he'd made a tactical error when Aizawa echoed him from the hallway in a tone of deep suspicion. "Stuff?" He was out of uniform for once and had a watering can in one hand, which meant he'd been on the veranda watering the plants. "What is stuff?" Hitoshi sighed. "Okay, if you don't want the abridged version, he has a bunch of really awful part-time jobs that vary from time to time and season to season. Taking off today was a big deal." "I'm surprised that his school allows it." Aizawa patted over to watch over Mike's shoulder. He didn't often eat things that weren't super-efficient meal replacements, but he made an exception for pancakes. Hitoshi was 90% sure it was because Aizawa had a secret sweet tooth. All the high-efficiency meal replacements he liked were sweet flavors. "He's your age, right?" It wasn't really an issue. He didn't get to go to high school. Hitoshi strapped on his chest panel, and he powered on his suit. The faceplate had beeped happily from where it sat on the table. He realized that both of his teachers were staring at him. "What? High school isn't mandatory." "Did he not get in?" Mike asked, paused in the act of pouring out another pancake. "He seems really smart." Izuku and Mike had gotten into a happy fight about the intersection of media and heroism in the modern age the night before. Hitoshi had been worried until he realized they'd both been having a blast arguing their respective corners. No, he wasn't allowed to sit exams at all. All the places he applied to refused to even issue him an exam ticket. Hitoshi had seen the rejection letters. Izuku hid them in a box under his bed, and Hitoshi had seen it once when he was over helping the New Year's cleaning. You couldn't claim that he hadn't tried. There'd been letters from nearly every high school in Musutafu that Hitoshi knew of, including UA, which was still something Hitoshi struggled to parse his feelings about. UA had been good for him in the end, but he had to go through a lot of grief just to make it to the starting line, and they hadn't let Izu even in the door. Technically, UA allowed quirkless students, but only the ones that you ever heard about getting in were rich kids, prodigies, and the odd legacy student. The only place Izu didn't have letters from were inner-city public schools that boasted open enrollment and were less flattering, and they were known in the news as villain factories. No high school diploma at all was better than being a graduate of one of those places. Unfortunately, Izu had been applying to schools before news broke about the massive admissions collusion scandal in the Musutafu Municipal School District. Unless you were applying to a hero program, quirks weren't supposed to be a part of the considerations for a student's school application. Despite that, a lot of public middle schools, whose funding was directly affected by the quality of students they turned out, had been sharing information on exceptional candidates with the schools those students chose to apply at, whether or not the students in question actually had the academic chops to study there or not. The news had made a big deal about how high schools were cherry-picking students according to their quirks and disregarding their performance on entrance exams. No one really discussed the other likely outcome of the admissions collusion, which was that they'd probably been screening out all the kids with bad quirks too, or in Izu's case, no quirk at all. Everything came out around the final exam time in Hitoshi's second year, which was probably why Mike didn't make the connection himself. They'd still been reeling from the USJ assault and Kamino Ward. Aizawa had still been in and out of physical therapy. Everyone had been on guard and didn't have a lot of time to pay attention to the news. The only reason Hitoshi had paid attention was because Izuku had been following the story. "Look, I gotta go. We can talk about this later. Preferably never." Mike gaped and put his spatula down harder than was really necessary. "Hitoshi, that's illegal." "Yeah, it is." He'd fought that fight several times before. That had been one of his first big reality checks about his future as a hero, learning that the law was only as good as the people enforcing it. The police told him he'd need to sue, which takes a lawyer, which takes money, which he didn't have. Even then, there was no guarantee he'd win. All the really good schools in town are private, which means that they can make whatever rules they want for admission. He stood up, grabbed his headpiece, and collected his overnight bag. "I really have to go now. I'll see you guys tomorrow, all right?" "Good luck," Mike called after him, and Aizawa was suspiciously silent. Watchtower was located in Jeddah Ward, and it was about 30 minutes of a train ride from Mike and Aizawa's house, and it wasn't an awful commute, but it was awkward to ride in his costume. Little kids stared at him, while the adults tried to figure out if he was someone they knew about. Fortunately, no one tried to talk to him. The good news was that he wouldn't have to do this too often. Once he landed a job, he'd be able to leave his suit in a vault at the agency and commute in his civilian clothes, but the interview dress code for new heroes was full costume, so he was stuck for the moment. The train emptied out as they approached his stop, and when they arrived, the passengers had been whittled down to Hitoshi and someone who looked like they were just riding to keep warm. Sure enough, Hitoshi was the only one who got off at the stop. The agency wasn't too far from the train station, which was a small blessing. It meant he didn't have to walk far, and eventually the agency would be able to make the area around the train stop much safer. Still, Hitoshi acknowledged that would take some doing as he took in the boarded-up shop fronts, the dirty streets, and groups of adults that were hanging around the street corners despite the early hour. He hated it when Aizawa was right, but it happened often enough that he'd gotten habituated to the feeling. It was also a point that Mike was right too, and that was kind of weird. Watchtower Agency was a squat little black building in the middle of an extensive renovation. The only reason he found it was because he had the address and his GPS had zoomed down to the street level. There was a canvas draped onto the shape of the side of the building and facing the street that would presumably one day be a sign. There was an electronic ticker tape display below it that wrapped around the entire circumference of the building. "Hey!" Hitoshi looked up to see someone waving at him from the roof. They were backlit by the morning sun, but he was pretty sure it was a hero. A villain probably wouldn't have been hanging out on top of a hero agency, and a civilian wouldn't try to pull off those shoulder spike things. "Stay there!" the man shouted and vanished, only to reappear a few minutes later at ground level, coming around the corner. Up close, Hitoshi could see more of his possible future boss. Aizawa had said he was a former vigilante, and he looked like it. The man was average height, but his limbs and chest were stout, with the kind of semi-ugly muscle you get from manual labor and not the gym. His nose had been broken at least twice, and Hitoshi would bet real money that it had been hooked to begin with. His costume wasn't fancy. Black BDUs, a dark red vest over the long-sleeve compression top, knee-high lace-up boots, and a black bandana mask that covered the entire top of his face, and all his hair. There was something about the way he walked, shoulders forward, arms swinging hard, that tickled his memory, but Hitoshi couldn't quite place who that reminded him of. "Are you Red Tower, sir?" Hitoshi asked, kind of hoping he was wrong. The guy looked like he was going to be a lot. "Well, ain't you polite?" The man snorted and came to a stop. Waite sat back on one heel with his arms crossed as he gave Hitoshi an unimpressed once-over. "Yeah, that's me. Watchman ain't around today. All goes well, you get to meet him later. You siren?" "Yes, sir." Red Tower snorted and spat off to one side. "Ain't no sirs around here. I answer to Tower, Hideo, or Hey Asshole. It's all the same to me. You got a nickname I should know about?" That persistent sense of familiarity just intensified. "No, sir. I prefer to use my hero name when I'm in uniform. I'm comfortable with using personal names off-duty, though." "Good, good. That's how we roll around here anyways." Tower nodded towards the front entrance of Watchtower, which was powered sliding door that was currently propped open with a dowel rod. Hitoshi followed him inside. The walls were bare, all the way down to the drywall in places, and the subflooring was exposed. Someone was going to put in tile, judging by the stack of boxes in one corner off the reception area, but it hadn't happened yet. Still, it wasn't a bad space. Hitoshi knew from his internships that not all agencies were put together logically or securely. The reception area acted as a bottleneck for the entire building. There was an open place for security of a door behind the front desk that led into a short hallway that had 2 meeting rooms on either side. He could see another security door at the end of the hall. That one had been installed and was live. "We'll talk in here. If all goes well, we can do a tour." Tower showed him the more finished of the 2 conference rooms. Neither had flooring, just exposed concrete. However, one room had been outfitted with a pair of folding chairs, and Tower dropped into the bigger of the 2 with a sigh. "The agency building's a work in progress, but we're on schedule to open the doors in April. We'll be patrolling in the meantime and continuing our open investigations. Ain't gonna lie to you, though. Some of your work hours may end up involving paint until I get some more sidekicks." "You're hiring more sidekicks?" Hitoshi took the open seat. "How many?" Tower huffed and sat forward in his chair with his elbows braced on his knees. "Well, that leads us to an important distinction. Strictly speaking, if you sign with us, then you wouldn't be a sidekick." Hitoshi wasn't sure how he felt about that. He had some experience, but not enough to make it as a solo hero or a team lead. Watchtower's kinda unique. He didn't start out planning to have a building or a patrol district. Starting an agency was a means to an end. We were going to dissolve it once we got what we were after, but it ended up growing legs on us. Watchtower began as an investigative agency. We work with the police, go in places where it's too dangerous to send undercover detectives, or hunting down leads too tenuous for them to actually justify the overtime. We closed some real big cases and made a name for ourselves, ended up making part of the local agency rankings where people started to recognize your name. That got us some government attention. They assigned us to a district and gave us a budget to establish a new premises. So now the agency's got a split, regular patroller branch and the sneaky spy shit branch. Suddenly, Tower's interest in Hitoshi made a lot more sense. Sneaky spy shit was squarely within his wheelhouse. Tower groaned and propped his back. "I'm getting too old for this, which is part of the problem. 3 years ago, when my partner and I got started, I didn't think I was ever going to slow down. Fact of the matter is that I can't keep up with Watchmen anymore the way I used to. He started doing this parkour shit, I don't even want to think about it." He sobered and pinned Hitoshi with a steel gray eye. "You know why I asked you here, Siren?" "I have some general guesses, but I don't know for sure." Somehow, despite Izuku's confidence, Hitoshi did not think that Tower was too concerned with non-violent villain apprehension. "Truth is, I've had my eye on you for a couple years now," Tower said, his eyes narrowed down to pale slivers between his lashes. "Watchman and I have had this little sports festival watch party every year because he's a big fucking nerd. I've been watching you since your first year. I saw you, a little snot-nosed gen ed kid with a non-physical villain quirk who was either too dumb or too stubborn to know the deck had been stacked against you, personally. Make it all the way to the final round on nothing but determination and spite. Bet the rest of your time at UA was the same. Your type doesn't thrive at UA, that's by design. They want to produce another All Might, and their entire curriculum is bent towards that end. Yet here you are, graduating UA in the top 20. Hitoshi stilled. No one had ever actually said that outright in his hearing. All the teachers and talking heads in the media liked to pretend that the top program in the country was meritocratic. And once you got into heroics, that was kind of true. It was just all the gatekeepers that you had to get past first that limited the majority of UA alumni to certain very specific types of heroes. Watchman is the beating heart of this agency, Tower continued. Me, I'm just a bruiser. You can find 20 of me anywhere you look, but Watchtower wouldn't have taken off without him. He finds our cases, he makes our contacts, he befriends our allies, he exposes our enemies as soft spots. My job was only ever to keep him alive long enough to do it. I need someone young to take over. They need the authority to cancel an op if necessary. That's why you and me are having this little chat. This ain't sidekick work. You'd be starting as one of the frontliners. I'm not a powerhouse. In his mind, Hitoshi was already halfway out the door. He'd spent time reading up on Red Tower. They were not even remotely similar types. If Tower was looking for a replacement for himself, Hitoshi was the last person he should be looking at. He should have listened to Aizawa and just rejected the offer out of hand. I'm familiar with your quirk. You breathe lasers and can punch through a brick wall. That's not a role I can easily step into. Maybe if I was more experienced. They ain't looking for a powerhouse to do this. Tower turned his face a heartbeat too late for Hitoshi to miss the rueful twist in his mouth. To be real honest, kid, I'm the one who wasn't a good fit. There weren't any other options, so we made do, but there's a lot of missions in our past that went south because I can't do quiet. I need someone fast and focused who isn't afraid to tell Watchman when he's fucking up or overextending himself. I think that's you. You got some rough edges, and not a lot of experience, sure, but you've got the right skills and fewer bad habits than a veteran hero might have. Watchman isn't a traditional hero. Hitoshi had an odd moment of feeling seen. The older hero didn't really wait on a response from him. See, the way I figure, with your background, you know what it's like to fight twice as hard for half as much. Watchman doesn't have an offensive quirk. He barely has a quirk at all. Everything he does is in his head. You think you were swimming upstream trying to break into heroics with a villain quirk? Try being functionally quirkless. He's all right in a fight. Better than all right. Shit's ridiculous, but the fact is that he can't hunt and watch his own back at the same time. You would be his full-time partner. I'd be the one who watches the Watchman. Hitoshi wanted to bite his tongue as soon as it was out, but Tower was far from offended. In fact, the joke earned him a horrifying parody of a smile, and Hitoshi realized all at once exactly who Tower had been reminding him of. Tower slapped his thigh, and he just laughed. Kid, you're all right. So what is it you want? Fame, money, fights? I can get you more of the last one, but the other two are still on the table. When he was 16, he'd had an easy answer. He wanted to prove he was more than his quirk. At 19, he'd already achieved the recognition of his peer group. He might not get along with all his classmates, but he knew that none of them doubted his determination to do good. He had given up on ever proving anything to his parents. What I want is to not have to move in 5 years. The people I care about are all located here. My quirk relies on the element of surprise. I can compensate with support gear somewhat, but I'd prefer to not get limited to a certain geographic area. Well, that I can give you for free. Intelligence operations aren't limited to our district. We go where the leads take us, even other municipalities. The hours aren't predictable either, which fucking sucks for your private life, but it's great when you want to be hard to track. What else? You probably are not going to be looking for promotional jobs or merch. The area isn't great. Lots of poor, desperate people and reduced police force. Not everyone is becoming a villain because they want to. Sometimes they're just poor, desperate, or dumb. What's your plan for that? Something in Tower's demeanor shifted, an intensity that hadn't been there before. Hitoshi realized he'd found a soapbox, and Tower was quick to jump on it. Fucking outreach. Advocating for low-income housing, job growth, non-standard quirk support, cutting crime off at its beginnings, that kind of shit. Can't do much if they already broke the law, except keep 'em from getting crucified on TV, though. Tower had started out as vigilante, hadn't he? He hadn't gotten caught either. That either meant that he was exceptionally stealthy, which he just admitted he wasn't, or he probably kept to the lower rent areas and in and around Musustafu, where there weren't enough cops around to bother interfering with what amounted to a volunteer hero. That meant he'd spent his career around places like this one and became personally acquainted with the root cause of crime, poverty, desperation, and life without dignity. A portion of the overall agency earnings will go to local community support organizations. Not sure which ones yet. Watchman's scouting out who we want to partner out with, but so far he hasn't found any he likes. Might end up just starting one if no one ends up impressing him, but that's his show. Tower shrugged. Your show too, if you want. I'm interested. Hitoshi was more than interested. I want to meet Watchman before we talk about contracts, though. I'd like to know who I'd be working with before making a commitment. Yeah, I figured. I can't talk money without him around anyways. He's the CFO. Tower pushed himself to his feet. You're gonna like him, though. Little shit makes friends like other people breathe. Hitoshi huffed a laugh. Yeah, I know someone like that. Yeah? Well, maybe you'll have better luck getting him to mind than I have. Hitoshi Shinso has entered the group chat between Shinso, Uraraka, and Bakugo. Class A. Guys, I think I just met Bakugo from like 20 years in the future after a major redemption arc. What? What's he like? Foul-mouthed, secretly soft. He talks tough, but keeps slipping up and using big words and correct grammar. Super serious about social reform. It's hilarious. I will fucking end you, eyebags. Who needs a redemption arc? Aw, look who's up before noon. You want to go, round-face? You want another dirt nap that bad? Sure. Shinso, where'd you meet a time traveler? Job interview. Watchtower out in Jada. I don't see them on the job board. I guess you got it? It wasn't advertised on the board. Red Tower said he'd be recruiting for patrollers soon, though. Why, are you interested in looking? Jada's a slum. Watchtower just made the municipal top 50. What the fuck are they doing out there? Fighting crime, one presumes. Yeah, I had that one offer, but it turns out they wanted me to have a permanent escort on account of I'm so delicate. I wouldn't have minded just doing some rescue and evacuation work, but Sarah got an offer from the same agency, and I found out mine was like 20% under his, and I got less vacation, so now I'm hunting again. Idiots. It's whatever, but real talk, are they going to advertise soon, Watchtower? I can give you Red Tower's number. You can get along with Bakugo. You'll like him. All right, where the fuck are you? I'm going to beat your ass. The building's still in Reno, so if you go and think that you're lost, you didn't. Oi! Thanks, you're the best. Are you coming tonight? Yeah, I got talked into it. Don't ignore me, assholes. Ooh, was it the mysterious boyfriend? Do we finally get to meet him? Ugh, yes. I was already excited, but now I'm pumped. Hitoshi looked up from his phone, which continued to ping with notifications as the train announced his stop. He tapped out a quick farewell and grabbed his bag. He'd used a public changing station to swap out of his hero costume for normal clothes, but he'd be happier when his gear was safely locked up. Izuku's apartment wasn't in an area nearly as bad as Jada's, but the neighborhood that he was in wasn't all that great either. I'm gonna ask him today, Hitoshi thought, as he dropped a few bills into the cup next to the old man who pretty much lived under the stoop of Izuku's apartment building. He'd already pretty much made up his mind about Watchtower's job. Their goals and morality seemed to align. That was rare enough in a civilian job. In heroics, it was a unicorn. If it hadn't been for Aizawa's cautions, he'd have probably signed that morning. No matter what kind of money he ended up making, though. It would be enough to pay for a better apartment somewhere safer and cleaner than where Izuku was living. Assuming Izuku was willing to move in with him. He didn't let himself think about that as he passed up the elevator and wasn't even looking to see if it had magically fixed since the week before. Any plans Hitoshi had vacated the premises when he reached Izuku's door and realized it was standing just ever so slightly open. It swung in at Hitoshi's touch to reveal his boyfriend curled up on his side just within the entrance. He was still dressed to run and had his shoes on. Hitoshi's heart stopped. Izu! Izuku popped up, eyes wide and wet. Toshi! He scooted back down the narrow hall that divided the microscopic kitchenette from his bathroom and then stopped to kick his sneakers off. There was a blue envelope clutched in one of his shaking hands. You're back. I'm sorry. I didn't get changed. I just need to... Hey, no. Satisfied that this had been an emotional emergency and not a physical one, Hitoshi took a moment to kick his shoes off and close the door behind him. He dropped to his knees beyond the sunken entrance area and crawled over to hover over his upset boyfriend. What happened? Are you okay? Izuku tried to shake his head and nod at the same time. It's good news, he insisted. I just convinced myself I wouldn't. He broke on a laugh and surged up to wrap Hitoshi in a powerful embrace, a really, really powerful embrace. Hitoshi felt his ribs protest. I did it! That's good. Still confused, Hitoshi returned the hug. What are we happy about? That made Izuku freeze. He pulled a little back so that they could look each other in the eye. I've been working on something since before we met. It was a long shot and... He admitted, turning pink. It's big. It's real big. How big? Hitoshi could think of any number of things Izuku might have been doing in private. He knew the boy had plans for his own future, although he didn't talk about them too often. It was like he was afraid to jinx himself, and that hadn't really bothered Hitoshi until recently. Both of their futures were in flux, and he needed to know for sure what they were going to do and go in the same direction. Izuku took a breath. Big enough that I could quit my part-time jobs. That was more than big. That was huge. Holy shit, seriously? Izuku nodded. Big enough that I'd have to. Okay, but what happened? What did you do? Izuku looked down at the crumpled envelope with a thoughtful expression. Hitoshi, there was something new in his eyes when he looked back up. Do you want me to tell you everything right now, or do you want a big romantic reveal? Shit, it was like Izuku knew him. The suspense might actually kill him, but Hitoshi loved a big romantic reveal. He sat back on his heels and cupped the back of his neck as he thought about it. It had started up after their inauspicious beginnings, with Izuku asking him out via text while they were sitting side by side in the same room, the most teenage boy thing you could do. Hitoshi had been too busy dying of a heart attack and trying to say yes at the same time to really mind it, but Izuku had felt bad about it afterwards and had determined to make up for it later by getting someone to drop rose petals on them from a second-story balcony when he'd asked Hitoshi if he wanted to commit. On one condition. So far in their relationship, Izuku had been the one who asked all the big questions. Just once, Hitoshi wanted to be the one to push for more. What? Izuku sat up properly, took up Hitoshi's face in his hands. He'd been planning a long romantic speech in his head, just 2 steps shy of proposing, really. It flew out of his mind as soon as he opened his mouth. What came out instead was, I want you to think about us moving in together. Izuku gaped like a fish before hauling him in for kisses all over his face. I mean, yes, absolutely. Are you sure? I thought you might want to stay with your teachers for a little while, now that you aren't in school. They're probably looking forward to having the house to themselves again. Hitoshi shook his head. I'm not. I can't assume. Hitoshi. There was a little crinkle in between Izuku's brows, and it was one that Hitoshi hated to see, but he only got it when he thought someone was being stupid, and he was too polite to tell them so. I think maybe you should. It seems to me like they want you to assume. Do you not want to live with me? Hitoshi's stomach swooped low with sudden fear. He did not want to be the guy who got dumped at graduation. He didn't want to get dumped at all ever. Izuku just huffed at him. I want to be around you all the time, and you know it. He sobered, though. It's just... Look, Toshi, it's really easy for people to grow apart when they live in different places. Your relationship with Mike and Aizawa was different before graduation. There was stuff they couldn't say to you. There was stuff you couldn't say to them either, right? But they seem like they want to be your family for real. You're 18. You only have so much longer to be a kid, and I don't want to see you miss out on that. Not for me, not like I'm going anywhere. I can wait as long as you need. I don't want to wait. Hitoshi reached out to push Izuku back down. And I'm not a kid. You're 2 months younger than me. Don't act all jaded and world-weary with me. I'm not. Izuku settled his arms around Hitoshi's neck. Childhood's like a balloon. It's hard to get back once you let it go, and you miss it once it's gone, he confessed. Hitoshi frowned. Hey, you didn't let yours go. It got taken from you. That's different. There's things I could have done, Izuku sighed. I could have relied on my mom more. I could have been more honest about what was happening. I thought that she'd be disappointed in me, but what she ended up thinking instead was far worse. That's how an adult thinks. Hitoshi poked him in the side and rolled so that they could both rest comfortably on the floor, limbs tangled and foreheads touching. You can't apply adult logic to a child's situation. You were a kid and reacted the way a kid reacts. Scared kids lie and hide stuff. That's not on you. That's on your past circumstances and a bunch of hostile asshole adults. She isn't an asshole, though. Izuku tucked his face into Hitoshi's shoulder. They both pretended his eyes hadn't started watering the second he tried to talk about his mother. Maybe she wasn't. Hitoshi had his doubts about it, but Izuku was stubborn and anxious enough to leave home and stay gone, even when his mom would have taken him back, so he couldn't rule the possibility out altogether. Not everyone had sociopathic reptiles for genetic donors the way Hitoshi did. But those teachers in your middle school were, and so were the admissions staff for all those high schools. Izuku made a non-committal noise against his throat. We were talking about you. How did it end up being about me? This is not the romantic day out I had planned, he said after a while. They'd reached the deflection stage of emotional conversation, and Hitoshi knew he wasn't going to get anything else out of Izuku that day. Silver lining. He had gotten out of talking more about Mike and Aizawa. Cuddling with my boyfriend, and nobody has to be anywhere for hours. Hitoshi agreed. You're right. It's the worst. He got a smack on the flank for his troubles, but Izuku's eyes were dry, albeit red, when he looked up. I'm sweaty, he said. And gross. Hitoshi grinned as a thought occurred to him. Hey, you're right. We should get you out of those damn clothes. Izuku's puppy-like yelp as Hitoshi flipped him onto his back again was the kind of music he thought he could spend his whole life listening to. All right, everyone, this is the conclusion of part 2 of Paper Agency. I'll be back with part 3 of this as soon as possible. I hope you guys are enjoying this one so far, and thank you all so much, as always, for listening.